morning, everybody, and welcome to our first ever three-person playbook leadership episode of 30 Minutes to President's Club. My name is Armand, and I'm here with my co-host, Nick Sigelski, and I'm here with my co-host, Mark Kosoglow. And today, we are talking about who to hire when as you build out your sales organization. When do you make your first AE hire, your SDR hire, and everything beyond that? Mark, why should people listen?
We are in the era of efficient growth. And the least efficient thing that you can do is hire the wrong people at the wrong time to do the wrong things. And so today we're going to talk about this important part of how do you architect out your sales organization so that you can run it and grow it super efficiently and not have any of that downside growth risk.
Great. So the way we're going to structure this episode is we're going to talk about hiring the right people at the right times and having them do the right things. So we're going to start with the upfront principles of what you look for in your first hire in any given category, whether that's AE, SDR, RevOps, etc. So we're going to talk about the principles as it relates to first versus 10th hire. Then what we'll do is we're going to go role by role by role. First AE, SDR, RevOps, directors, managers, etc. And we'll talk about some of the best practices that are role specific. And we'll finish by talking about what you guys have seen in terms of best practice ratios for SDR to AE or AE to manager, etc. when you were leading outreach and you led PAVE. So let's hit this thing.
What is the difference between a first hire or a builder in a role and someone who might be the 10th hire or an executor or a scaler in a role?
There's different kinds of hires. There's hires that are like the first round draft pick, but he's a freshman quarterback. He's only made 8 starts in college, but man, the arm is a cannon and I can develop this into a Hall of Famer. Then there's the draft pick that's like, well, you know what? 4 years, started at Oregon, won the Heisman Trophy, pretty good arm, but really understands the game and stuff like that. In the same way that you can kind of draft a team based on how much ability you have to develop talent, that is what determines what kind of your first hire is. Your first hire needs to be usually a self-sufficient person that just needs a little bit of tweaking to dial in what they're going to be doing with you. Your 10th hire is that talent that has all these awesome traits, but maybe needs that skill development that you have a little bit more time to put into now.
One thing that's really important to note here is you have people who can build process and follow process. When you're making the first hire in any role, let's use an AE as an example. A lot of AEs might know a 5-step sales process. They know how to run a discovery call, they know how to run a demo, then they go into their multi-threading, their proposal, and beyond. The problem is, if you're joining an early stage company, you might have the wrong process in the first place. It's not about whether or not you're following the process well enough. It's realizing, okay, if I followed this process 3 times through a sales cycle and it didn't work, I might actually have to rearrange the order in which I go after certain people in the sales cycle. Or if I'm using these discovery talk tracks that worked on 2 calls and then they don't work on calls 3, 4, and 5, you literally have to go back to the drawing board and say, I'm going to re-architect our entire discovery flow. So you need someone who thinks from first principles and can think not how do I follow this process, but literally what is the way that I need to build this sales motion from scratch and then figure out how to execute the process from there.
So what does that actually look like in terms of like company background, years of experience, industry? I'm curious both for like when you were leading PAVE and then also Mark, when you were hiring your first couple folks at Outreach, like what were you looking for in terms of vetting backgrounds and profiles?
So I do some early stage advising for founders who are doing founder-led sales, and oftentimes they're making their first AE hire. The biggest mistake is they hire someone who's good at following process. What that usually looks like is, I don't have anything wrong with these companies, but they hire someone who's either way too experienced for the role.
Yeah.
So they hire someone with 15 years of sales experience who's sort of stuck in their ways. Or they hire someone who's been at big box Oracle, where they have an SDR to do their entire job for them. They have a perfect cookie cutter territory with an install base. They have sales engineers and sub AEs running their discovery calls and their demos, and they're basically glorified quarterbacks. And they're like, oh shoot, I haven't actually used a sequence in 17 years, or I don't even know what a sequence is. I've followed this exact same sales process for the last 10 years, but I didn't realize that this actually needed to be ripped out. Let's say, for example, I'm in a mid-market sale. What I want to find is someone with 2 to 3 years of closing experience, ideally in the growth stages of a company. And Mark, I'm curious for your perspective on this. I've found that the people who have only worked at early stage companies like Series Seed and A.
Mm.
Unless those companies made it all the way, which means they would have been to the growth stages, they've usually just learned a bunch of bad habits.
Mm.
They have not actually learned what excellence looks like. But if you take someone from Series C to F, for example, there's still a lot of like hair on the deals, hair on the product. There are a lot of things that are messed up, but there is some semblance of scale. So you still have the opportunity to build process from scratch, but you've also seen what good process looks like. So your team isn't building the wrong things.
Your first seller can't sell like you sell as a founder.
Mhm.
It just doesn't work. Founders can sell differently. That CEO title, that founder title, it creates a different kind of energy, a different environment. You also have been obsessing over this problem for weeks or months or years.
Mhm.
The way you understand it, all the conversations you've had, that new rep is never going to have all of that kind of context. So you have to make sure that, first of all, you don't expect them to be able to sell like you did. They have to be able to come in and figure that out. Hence why they need that skills part and the traits part. You can orient them to the experience. I think there is this special kind of AE that can come in as the first seller, understand that they can't sell like the founder, but they can learn about how the founder is sold. And then that's the kind of hire that I almost always see win. To me, I don't care if they've closed a lot. I don't care, but do they have this ability that I'm going to push through, but I know the push through, I have to use the resources around me. I can't just sit in isolation and try to figure it out.
How the hell do you test for that when you're hiring someone?
I think you just have to find a pocket of people, if you're a founder, that knows of these type of people, and when they come on the market, boy, you better snag them up. I mean, that's not super helpful, but that's the truth.
Okay, well, just one follow-up question on that. Other than going on LinkedIn, DMing Mark Kosoglow, I'm a founder. I don't know where to start. Where do I go to find those people who might know?
Yeah, I think if you look for people that are at a startup that's done really well, and you go back and you look at their LinkedIn and you can tell they're like they were there maybe in the first 12 to 18 months, they're still there after 2 or 3 years and they still are having success. That is usually like the first light bulb moment that they can make it work. If you go look on there and they have, oh, guess what? They started at a young startup and they only lasted 11 months and they did that 2 or 3 times, that's not a person that can handle that, even though they think that they can. Can they stay for 2 to 3 years at a startup that's getting good growth, maybe is in a competitive market if you are too, and you're looking for that type of person? And what you want to do is you want to kind of attract them out of that job and kind of recruit them over to you, I guess.
If we take a step away from the profile itself,
Mhm.
let's say that you're faced with someone, in my case, who has growth stage experience, or in Mark's case, who has early stage experience. How do you know that they're actually the right person for the job?
Mhm.
Number one, like Mark said, you back channel a lot in
Yeah.
the early stage. Every single hire gets at least 2 back channels. Not the references you gave us,
Mhm.
but you back channel the heck out of them. But then number two, you test a lot more for adaptability in the interview process. So what I mean by that is some teams, when they're doing a mock discovery call, they will have the rep sell their product they're already selling today.
Mhm.
To me, that is a no-go in the early stages.
Mhm.
I'm going to have you sell Pave,
Mhm.
and our website has $5 icons from Fiverr
Yeah.
and basically has no pictures of the product, and you have no idea what we do. I might send you a 90-second video of the product
Mhm.
and a high-level sense of who you're selling to, and I need to see you build a structure for a call and come up with 3 or 4 discovery questions. From there, replays inside of your interview process can also show adaptability.
Mhm.
So I'll either run a mock cold call or a mock discovery call through twice.
Mhm.
So I'll give someone coaching and then I'll be like, hey, I think you might have needed to tweak these 1 or 2 things. I have had false positives with hires who have aced the mock discovery the first time.
Mhm.
I have never had a false positive with someone who aced the mock discovery twice.
I see.
Mm.
Never.
Talk to me about right versus wrong time of hiring first AE. Let's start there.
It depends on what type of founder you are. If you're product and engineering founder, you shouldn't hire a salesperson until you have done a couple deals yourself and actually understand what does it take to sell this kind of product. And the reason for that is simple. Product and technical people at times can sit in a room and figure out what something's like, and they're not getting that direct customer feedback. Someone like me, I don't even know what the heck to build or how to build it until I've talked to like 100 people and they tell me exactly what to do. I think that helps you build a better product as a technical or an engineering founder. And it also helps you have empathy for the seller when you're hiring them later. It helps you give them some calls to look at and figure out. You need to get through that before you hire an AE. But if you're a GTM founder and you need to work on product and all that kind of stuff, I think it's okay to hire an AE much faster.
I think about product and process for the founder. You're not going to have perfect product market fit, but if every time you talk to a customer, they're like, I want this completely different thing that's different from the vision that you're taking me in, that means that you need to keep spending time with customers to pull your product in the right direction. If we're talking about 20 or 30% tweaks, that's something where you continue to have the AE give feedback back to your engineering team and work with you. But if it's like every single time the complete thesis of your product is changing for every single sales cycle, you need to continue to spend time with your customers as a founder. That's number one. Number two, you do not need a fully perfectly baked sales process, but you should at least high level know the steps and the people in your sales process. So for example, when I'm working with founders, at the beginning we're like, alrighty, we need to like figure out like what are the problems we're even bringing up in a discovery call. And then if we're starting at a director of people ops, let's try to go laterally to the director of compensation. But then if we realize that the director of comp, when they get involved, 9 times out of 10, it blows up the deal. We got to figure out a different direction that we're going in. As long as we're in that iterating mode where we don't even like know the direction we should be taking our sales cycle and the key people that need to be involved in, to me, that's still the founder's job. But once you get a general sense of like, all right, these are the people who are typically involved in my sale. And if I keep running these steps in my sale, I might not be perfect at it, but I can semi-predictably close a deal if I get 10 at-bats. To me, that means you might be ready to bring on your first AE. I tend to focus less on the ARR milestones and more focus on the predictability.
There's something that you have to be very careful of is depending on the type of rep that you hire, getting a lot of feedback about the product that might make you doubt if it has product market fit can ruin a great salesperson. Some reps are everything is like, well, I really can understand why they need this connection to Salesforce. And until we have it, like, I don't know if I can sell it. And their whole confidence crumbles versus accepting the challenge of that early stage product and all of the deficiencies and things that it should have, but it doesn't yet. If you hire the wrong person at the wrong time, and they're constantly getting feedback of stuff that's not quite ready in your product. Oh, you guys don't have SOC 2? Oh, you don't do this? Which, of course, no, we're only 6 months old. We don't do any of that stuff yet. Yet we have this grand vision, but this is what we do right now. Then that person's confidence will slide down. They will not work out. But if you're that person's like, oh my God, give me another challenge. They said I don't have SOC 2. I'm going to win this deal anyway. Let me show you how. That's when you've got that right person and that right mentality. That doesn't mean that they don't come back to me like, yo, guys, last 3 deals I won, I got over the line with SOC 2. Don't know how much longer I'll be able to pull off these miracles. I need you guys to get me SOC 2. So the communication lines are still open, but the objection and the excuses and the like, I can't get over this, that stuff is pulled off the table.
This first AE hire is literally the extension of the CEO. You are the front line talking to the customer, and it is critical that you're able to funnel the right feedback back to your product team. The wrong first AE hire can completely derail your product direction, which is why the founder needs to stay involved. An AE who has good product sense has good problem sense. And what I mean by that is if a prospect asks for a faster horse, they hear, okay, this person's moving too slowly. I'm going to go build a car. An AE who leads your product in the wrong direction hears a prospect say, I need a faster horse. And then they go to the engineering team and they say, give me a faster horse. You need to hear the ask or the problem behind what prospects are asking for, and then understand what's the problem that they're really trying to solve, and then bring that to your engineering team. Otherwise, you just end up with this Frankenstein of a product where you're constantly fulfilling feature requests that are based on the legacy solutions in the market, and then you just end up building what is already out there, and you end up building a really crappy product.
I want to hear from both of you guys. First AE, what does the scope of what they're doing look like, and how does that differ from a scaled up org's AEs?
I'll say mostly the scope of work for me for a young AE is I need you to concentrate on winning deals, but then understand what are you doing and start to help me figure out what is our long-term process going to be. That's the big scope of what I'm doing. And then when you hire your first AE, you're usually going to be under 10 employees. I want somebody that's just like focused on winning deals, documenting how that's going to work, and then can put on that Swiss Army hat every once in a while when we need some help in other areas of the business.
I would say half the time is spent selling, half the time is spent building. When you think about the selling side, what makes it different is if I ever see an AE who is asking me about inbound lead flow as the first AE, or if they're asking about SDR support, it's like you are the SDR.
Yeah, right.
You are the sales engineer. Like you're running all of your demos, all your own prospecting, all of that stuff. You are a true full cycle AE. So on the sales side, that's what I expect. On the building side, to Mark's point, I expect you to be coming back and being like, hey, we've tried to get in front of finance 3 times. It seems like that's a dead path in our deals. I'm going to try for my next 5 deals going the legal route or the ops route instead. It's half building your sales process and then half building your product, funneling back what you're hearing from the market to your engineers.
How do you reconcile your approach about inbound lead flow with what Mark said?
A lot of times, first AE hire, in fact, almost always, comes before first marketing hire. There's very little marketing. Usually, if a company's doing well, first AE hire also comes before first SDR.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you might just be one of these hot companies where Mark's got his operator wait list and he's got all of these people chomping at the bit and he's ready to shoot fish in a barrel. Or you might be a company that has had the stealth logo on your website
Yeah.
and no one knows what you do and you cannot rely on inbound leads. Yeah, sure, with PLG, with early stage traction, with fundraising announcements, sure, you can have some inbound coming in. But if you don't have inbound coming in, what are you going to do? Just like not hire an AE? Are you going to go hire a marketer first? Are you going to go hire an SDR first? No, you're going to hire an AE who can fill their own funnel and close it too.
Great.
And you might work 80 hours a week as the first AE. I did. If you're not ready to sign up for that life in the early stages of building a company, you have a little bit of a misalignment between the job you're taking on and the lifestyle that you'd like to live.
I wouldn't expect, if you don't have marketers and all this stuff, for you to be getting inbound leads. And I think I probably maybe intimated that.
Yeah.
What I mean is I can go out there with a general problem, solution, value prop statement, and someone is going to respond to it so that I can actually do prospecting versus, hey, guess what? I have this really cool shoe tire that's going to increase your revenue by 3x within 6 months if all your reps tie their shoe this way. Nobody's ever going to be attracted to that product. So there's no way that I can create demand and bring it in order to do deals. But I don't expect the company to have some kind of like rolling inbound channel that's giving me 2 or 3 meetings a day.
So let's actually transition to that next role. We've talked about AE. Let's talk about first SDR. I'm curious about the right person. So what are we looking for from like a background experience perspective? Right time. When do we plug SDR in? And then right things. What do we actually have that first SDR do?
So let's start with the timing. To me, there are 2 times you could hire an SDR. The first is you could hire an SDR before you hire the first AE. But the more common time would be you hire that SDR to support 1 or usually 2 AEs. Let's talk about the exception to the rule. So there are some times where a founder they're close on the sales process, but maybe they're a solo founder and they're managing a bunch of other things. Maybe they're not like amazing at the prospecting thing. Maybe they don't have the time to do all of this stuff, but they're running these sales cycles. They're finding some success, but they're not quite at the point where they're ready to pass off the closing process. They might hire an SDR as a stopgap, and that SDR can come in for 6 months before an AE gets hired and fill the founder's funnel and play a bunch of other roles and honestly get like really close access to a founder that they normally wouldn't get. That is the rare scenario. Of the 4 folks that I advise right now, 2 of them actually have SDRs, but they don't have AEs yet. And frankly, most of the teams that I've worked with in the past, they go straight to the first AE. From there, I find it usually helpful to have that AE stay full cycle. And then you can either pair that SDR 1-to-1 or 2 AEs to 1. The reason for that is the SDRs oftentimes, they take a little bit of time to get productive if you don't have proper enablement and systems in place for them. And it takes much longer than you'd think to ramp such a junior hire in an environment where SDRs are literally like, they're not used to experimenting with messaging all the time. When it comes to like building sales process, it's one thing to be a little bit crafty with your cold call opener. It's another thing to literally have to experiment with the different problems you're solving as someone who's fresh out of college. So if you're going to hire an early SDR, I almost always recommend find an SDR who has 6 to 12 months of experience and at least knows how to send sequences and the fundamentals of what a good cold email looks like and all that stuff. Make sure that you hire someone who has a baseline of prospecting so that they can take some of those principles and then you can teach them the early stage stuff.
Yeah.
Versus if I have 3 SDRs on the team already, the best SDRs in my experience are these people who actually don't have any SDR experience, and they come as career changers or college grads or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But I think that first SDR hire really needs to be someone who has experience already.
100%. If you think that you're going to hire somebody out of college and teach them how to be an SDR, and it's you as a founder, and you've never had the SDR job, and you're a technical founder, never sold, and like that's ridiculous,
Yeah.
right? This aligns to my philosophy on AEs. I want my AEs closing deals and documenting process. That's like the two most important things. I want my AEs selling as much as they can. At bats are like the premium. And so I have found in a typical mid-market deal, say 20 to 50K deal, a rep can handle between 20 and 30 deals at a time. Once I have a rep that has got a full pipeline, they need to spend time on deals now, not sourcing deals. They can't do both. They either have to like lower down their deal load to up their prospecting, or they have to find somebody else to prospect so they can keep their deal load high. That's when you hire that SDR. I don't think it's a bad idea necessarily to start with an AE SDR pair and let them get together. I would argue, though, if you do that, it should be in an office where those two sit right next to each other and they're just scheming all day long about how to conquer the world. And I don't think that kind of thing happens as well in a remote situation. If you are in a highly volatile, figure it out situation, you have to have somebody that loves to experiment, be creative, doesn't mind the change. Every day can look different. You can't hire the robotic, hey, I want to come in, do my stuff, crush my number, and follow the thing, and not be responsible for how do I plan my day. I want to be responsible for how do I execute my day. This first SDR typically needs to be, I like to plan my day, then execute, not just execute.
Okay, so let's move to another title that we would hire, which is a RevOps person. My big question is, what the heck do you have your first RevOps hire do?
I think your first RevOps person absolutely must be a builder, not a consultant.
Okay.
All right. So the first thing I want is somebody that can get in there and connect outreach to Marketo, to Salesforce, to CPQ, to my reporting engine. And like, it's just all running flawlessly. Right. And then when do you hire that person? I think that this is a force multiplier role. I would hire this person at the time of my first AE and maybe even prior to my first AE. I think that if you're a founder doing founder-led sales and you can start to get these RevOps processes in place, you can extend your time doing that if you want to do that. And that helps you, get even more prepared for the AE. You either have to decide, listen, I want to stay selling a little bit longer as a founder, doing founder-led sales, and RevOps is going to help me do that. Or I'm ready to hire an AE, and then pretty soon after that, you're going to have to hire a RevOps person because that AE, you don't want them fiddling around with like, how do I create a quote? How do I make sure we get paid?
How do you differ from that, Armand, or what would you add?
So I also think that the advice to hire RevOps is way too late.
Yeah.
Most people say hire RevOps 8 to 1, 8 AEs to 1. To me, at that point, you've got a rat's nest of all of you. You have 7 versions of every account. You have no data on any of your accounts. Your reps are all working the same people. There's no semblance of territories whatsoever. All of the leads that are being funneled into your system aren't properly attributed to the accounts. And then your RevOps person comes in and they're just like, it's a complete mess. That's number one. Number two, what people don't realize is RevOps makes salespeople faster. RevOps makes salespeople so much faster. So I think of 3 domains of RevOps. Number one, you have strategy. So strategies like capacity modeling, forecasting, things like that.
Comp plans.
Exactly. Number 2 is systems. Setting up Salesforce or Outreach and making sure that if someone requests a demo that's created as lead, that gets attached to the right account. And then that lead gets the employee count populated on it, their fundraising amount, all the data enrichment. And then the third piece is I put comp in another bucket, which is designing the comp plans, making sure people get paid and all that stuff. I think the strategy piece is probably like the least important as the first RevOps hire.
Yeah.
The system stuff is so important.
Let's talk about enablement. When do I bring them in?
If you hire a enablement person a little bit early, they need to make sure that they have like other things that they can contribute to. For example, some RevOps people are pretty good with systems. You got your RevOps person, you got a half a RevOps person with your enablement person, and then they're doing the enablement stuff. Or you're like, hey, listen, maybe you hire a great trainer or coach enablement person. Now they need to be doing your film reviews and stuff like that. So there's some variability based on who you are as a leader and then what kind of enablement person you have. But I think that once you get to 5 to 6 reps, you're starting to need to have continual rhythm of how you want to train. And that's a problem that you're going to have to solve. And maybe you can do it if you're a good trainer type person. But if you're not, then that's probably about when you're going to need to bring in enablement.
For me, my job as a VP of sales at Pave was to play the role of enablement as long as I felt we were still building process. Once we went from building process to replicating process, that's when I was like, okay, this needs to get off my plate a little bit. That usually happens around 4 or 5 reps. I'll give you a couple of examples here. So if you're in a room of 3 to 4 early stage reps, every single week we would get into a room and we would pull out the whiteboard and we would draw out our discovery trees. And we'd be like, all right, let's follow the last 7 deals that we sold. All right, whenever we went down this path, it didn't work. Let's cross that off the tree. Let's move this over here. All right, this week, like let's try this game plan. Let's see if that gets us into a better place with these sales cycles. I actually don't want enablement involved there.
Yeah.
I actually think they get in the way. I want that conversation to be between me and my reps, and I was even still selling at that point in time. So the question is, when we're onboarding something, what do? I would be like, all right, we have like 3 major artifacts in our sales cycle. We've got our prospecting sequences, we've got our discovery trees, and we have our sales process. Each of you founding reps is going to take a piece of that and teach it to this new rep. Plus, I've got these like 4 industry trainings that we need to run. How does a stock option work? Who are our buyer personas, etc. Again, I'm going to assign this stuff out. And this is like Google Doc enablement.
Yeah.
It's like I want bullet points and conversations, and then you pulling up a discovery call and being like, look, that's what I was talking about, or pulling up a LinkedIn profile. This does not need to be pretty. But once that process actually got codified, and once we had enough reps in the room where not everyone was in the room with product and engineering anymore, all of a sudden I started to notice, like, wait, you don't know that about our product? I was like, oh, that's because Morgan and Cole literally sat in the bug bash when the engineers were building this. And now we're a team of 30 people as a company, and you're not actually like getting all this tribal knowledge anymore. Now I need to go and extract all that information from the early stage sellers, document it, and continue to repeat that with every new person who gets onboarded. And honestly, like, that's something that would require someone who has a little bit more full-time attention to it.
Here's a good rule of thumb if you want to test if you're ready for a hire. Can you hire a contractor in that role and keep them busy for at least 6 weeks? If you can manage them and they're productively doing work for 6 weeks, then you're probably ready to hire someone in a full-time role that can do that all the time. If you hire a contractor or an advisor or a consultant, and after 2 weeks, you're already skipping meetings. You're already like, I don't know what to talk to this person about. What should they be doing? You're not ready to hire somebody yet. I have a RevOps person. I know how to use RevOps. We hired a contractor, and literally within a month, we had to double his time. If I have to double his retainer again, I'm probably about ready to hire somebody internally.
Question for both of you on enablement. What are you looking for as it relates to experience, persona, archetype of the hire?
There's certain roles that support the sales leader. You have to know who you are as a sales leader to know how to do those. I'm a great trainer. I'm a great coach. I engage people. I get people to buy in. I don't need somebody to do my trainings. What I need for somebody is somebody to help me reverse engineer the process, create all the materials, get everybody done. What is the follow-up process after that my team needs to follow? I don't need them to like do the trainer. So for me, I'm hiring that kind of more, I'm the organizer type of enablement person. I'm not a trainer.
Yeah.
But if I was on the opposite end of that spectrum, I should hire the trainer and then do the part I'm good at. So same thing for RevOps. Like, I'm pretty operational, and I think I'm more strategic though than operational. I don't need to hire a strategic RevOps person. I need to hire the builder to do that. And so I think you just have to look at yourself, and you want to hire the role that kind of complements your weaknesses.
One really great test that we would run at Pave is we would send an enablement person 3 or 4 of our best discovery calls. And then we would say, run a discovery training.
Yep.
And that shows, can you extract first principles from the best reps?
Yeah.
Not just copy paste your med pick process or your command of the message, but can you look at tapes and identify the patterns across the top reps and then create that into something repeatable without me literally walking you through what the process should be in the first place.
Yeah. Let's talk about engineering, sales engineers. When do I bring in my first SE?
This is one of the roles that I think if you hire it too early, handicaps your team.
Yeah.
In the beginning, your founding AEs have to be just as good about the problem set as they are about the technical stuff of your product. What are the limitations? How does it work? In this use case, how is it different than this other use case? What is the underlying technology? Can I explain what a conflict resolution layer is in my Salesforce sync or not, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like these are technical things that normally a sales engineer would do. What that does is, first of all, it creates this culture of we expect you to know certain things. And if our first reps can figure it out, you can figure it out. Second thing it does is it changes what the role of the SE is. If your SE is a technical support person in a pre-sale cycle that's a demo jockey, you have messed up that role. That's not what that role's job is. That role's job is to be a second set of eyes and ears to strategize how do we solve technical problems that cause the person to understand how they can receive the outcome our product does. That's the job of an SE, right? When I start to see SEs are being needed is when you start to move a little bit up market. You start to get into a little bit more technical buyers. You get past that first like super early adopters that are kind of like, yeah, we kind of get it. We get it enough, but we're just excited about your tech and we'll buy, right?
Mm-hmm.
You start to need that second set of eyes and ears in the system. I say once you get to about 10 or 12 reps, this is when an SC starts to come in because now you've laid the baseline of you're expected to know technical stuff. You just can't rely on your SC to show up. Like we've all heard the horror stories of like Salesforce reps who can't even demo Salesforce because they don't use it themselves and they only have an SC that does all their demoing and they don't even know where to click to create a quote. You create that culture if you hire an SC too early.
So time-wise, in terms of when you bring them in, if we do it too early, we handicap the team. We're looking for generally when we're past like the vision sale and we're more into like, all right, this thing like really has to work. People need to really understand it. They're like connecting the technical how to the problem and the outcome. You think generally 10 to 12 reps is the right time.
Yeah.
What do we point that person at?
I think that someone has to own the demo narrative and you have to decide who that is. At Catalyst, we created this cool concept called the demo playlist. And it's like a Spotify playlist. And there was like 12 different songs on that playlist, 12 different demos, a demo for this role, a demo for this use case, a demo for this. Somebody has to like script those out. And I was really lucky. I worked with a guy named Sean Bernard at Catalyst. Once I showed Sean what a narrative-based demo is, he exploded. He owned our demo. He's the one to be like, all right, you know what? Product just released this, guys. I've updated these 3 demos in the demo playlist. This is how I've updated them. This is how they're different. Go listen to them so you can see how to do it. That is like what I point that SE to me is like, your job is to own this demo and make it absolutely sing because I think that the technical expertise helps you create like a different type of demo than when you're just like as a normal seller trying to figure out how to do a demo early on.
What would you add, Armand?
We had triggers for our sales engineer that was certain deal sizes and certain deal problems. And the certain deal problems are far, far more important. If a company got to over 750 employees, they probably had some international employees. And international employees have obviously payouts in a completely different currency.
Yeah.
And oftentimes there are completely different pay regulations. And that really taxed our permission system at Pave. And also the way that you have to create different comp philosophies by geo and by department and all of that stuff. And so I expected an AE to be able to run a demo where they could say, these are the different things you could do in Pave. These are the different types of comp philosophies you can support. But when it starts to get into like, how do I do 3 different comp philosophies for engineering in EMEA versus sales over here with variable versus non-variable comp, and by the way, some of them get equity bonuses and others don't, then I'm like, okay, bring in your sales engineer. That's number 1. Number 2 is I brought in certain triggers for the team. There were certain integrations that gave Pave a lot of trouble, and I knew they were going to cause a lot of problems for post-sales. And so whenever certain things would pop up like that, we would bring in a sales engineer. There are a lot of things that will not be documented from a product standpoint when you're in early stage selling. We had to build a whole integration source of truth where it was, these are the 20 integrations we have. This is who they do and don't integrate with. He had to work with the engineering team to make sure that all of the deals were scoped properly. And I find that making sure that there's a smooth transition between pre and post sales and you're not selling a bunch of bad deals requires one, sellers who are setting the right expectations, but then two, you need documented expectations that come from the product and the engineering team. And oftentimes I find the sales engineer is the best person to actually play that role.
What am I looking for as it relates to the type of sales engineer I'm bringing in? And am I looking for someone who is the first SE hire somewhere else, maybe in a different industry? Am I getting somebody who is an SE over at Salesforce? What's the best practice for my first SE that I hire?
I think this is a role where I want to see really deep experience for my first person. It can be a very challenging role to feel productive and connected, and like you don't get shoved into this.
Mhm.
Oh, you know what? I'm doing an infosec call. Let me bring on my SE. And you know what? He talks literally for 15 seconds of the hour-long meeting because as a salesperson, I'm not willing to let him take over parts of the conversation, right? You need to bring somebody in that has some street cred, some expertise, somebody that has a little bit of teeth to them, that's going to kind of bite into this stuff.
Yeah.
And you want that person to me like a little bit more sales
Mhm.
leaning than technical leaning.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's some SEs that are basically like engineers in hiding that can go code stuff up. There's other sales engineers that have a basic understanding of how technology works and can dig into technical problems, but they know how to sell better. I want a little bit more sales leaning SE that maybe isn't going to get into code and that kind of level of technical detail, but understands that stuff enough to be able to craft these technical solutions that help a deal get done.
The number one thing that I want to test for in a sales engineer is, can you figure out how to solve a problem without writing new code? Can you be crafty in that your product doesn't do something, but you know your product well enough, you know the backend well enough that you can offer your prospect different ways to accomplish the same thing? And that's what a really smart sales engineer does, is they don't even have to code.
Yes.
They don't have to go back to the engineering team because they're really crafty with new use cases. They teach you how to open a bottle with a spoon so you don't have to
Yeah.
go buy a bottle opener.
It's really funny because that connects to the exact same thing that you said about early AE having problem understanding rather than saying, "Yep, oh, we're just going to build this extra product." Because what you just said is not just an SE thing. Frankly, it's a sales thing, it's a company thing, which is it's not always saying, "Oh, we think we can't solve this with what we have today." It can sometimes be reframing the problem or showing them, "Hey, we can solve 90% of it." That probably gets the job done for you. All right, let's talk about the key ratios of like AEs against some of these other roles that we've talked about, Mark.
In the beginning, a little inefficiency is okay as long as it creates more certainty around achieving a revenue outcome.
Hmm.
So I'm very bullish in the beginning of having just a 1-to-1 ratio for the first 3 or 4 AEs
Hmm.
and over indexing on creating too much pipeline
Hmm.
for them, especially if you have a nascent or non-existent marketing function and so much of your initial pipeline is sourced outbound.
Hmm.
I'm definitely going to be having like a 1-to-1 ratio. I had a 1-to-1 ratio at Outreach for a long time. We had a 1-to-1 ratio almost at Catalyst. And I think until you get to like, 10, $20 million, like the safety of knowing that a rep is going to stay fed is more valuable to me than the cost savings of trying to figure out how to be ultra efficient with multiple people. So in the beginning, I say 1-to-1. Around 10 to 12 reps, we start to go to a 2 AE to 1 AE ratio. I also determine on your economics, right? If I'm doing $100,000 deals, I have a little bit more wiggle room. This is if I'm doing versus if I'm doing a whole bunch of transactional like 8K deals.
Yeah, for me, it's same thing. We hired two AEs and then two more SDRs. And so they were paired 1-to-1. But then eventually, when we got to a team of 12, we had like 6 SDRs, or 16, it was 8 SDRs,
Yeah.
things like that.
All right, so let's talk about AE to SE, RevOps, and enablement.
I think these are different things. I don't think that RevOps is necessarily a ratio thing.
Hmm.
It's a what is the amount of work that we need to get done. I think that you just need to hire that person early. If you want to use a ratio, I think once you get to that like 15 to 20 seller mark, you start to create enough of a workload and backlog that you have to have somebody else that's there to help your first RevOps person. That's just a generality. SC, I have found that a typical SC can usually support 5 to 7 AEs at a time, depending on your deal size and the amount of involvement that they have in the deal. And then from an enablement standpoint, I think early on, you gotta kind of have to stretch that first enablement hire. I would say they need to go to like 25 to 30 type of reps before you really start to add on like specific other enablement functions to relieve some of the workload of that first a generalist enablement person.
Yeah, really similar where RevOps hire, make the first one as early as possible. From there, I think it was around a team of like 16 or 20. We split systems and strategy
Yeah.
because that's when we start to get into capacity modeling and forecasting and all of that stuff. But I still want someone fully focused on systems. You might even have 1.5 people where you have a sales ops manager and a sales ops associate who's like helping with dashboards and stuff like that. And then you have someone who's just focused on like helping you with board meetings and things like that.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to enablement, that person like we had one person forever,
Yeah.
frankly, and that carried us past 20 plus reps.
Yeah.
Sales engineering, I think you need to think about how many deals actually need support from an SE.
Yeah.
So, for example, we had 16 reps, but it was 8 SMB commercial, 8 mid market / enterprise.
Yeah.
That SE only had to help the mid market and enterprise reps. So, even though we had 16 reps, we only needed one SE for a pretty
Yeah.
long time.
Let's talk about AE to manager ratios.
An early stage startup with early stage reps require a lot more management than as you start to scale out and you have more mature processes and systems. I would say the max you can ever go is 10 and feel safe. 12 is a super stretch. And if you can get in that 6 or 7 range, I think that's like really the sweet spot in a highly complex sale that needs a lot of coaching.
When I had 4 AEs plus 2 SDRs plus a RevOps person, that started to become too much for me to manage while I was still closing. So that's when I took over my formal leadership role and I stopped player coaching and I just coached. From there, I maintained ownership of the team up until 8 AEs, just because in that early stage, it's really helpful to just like maintain close contact with those first reps. But then I hired an SDR manager to take on the SDRs once we had 4 of them. So that was really, really helpful. Once we got to 8, I brought on my first manager. I made a really big mistake where I should have given them some of my more experienced reps. I stacked new on new. So I kept some of the more experienced senior reps and all that stuff. And then I gave them, one experienced rep, 2 junior ones, and then had them go and hire 2 more people because I'm like, oh, big company thing. You need to hire out your team because that's how you build a culture and all that stuff. The problem is that manager literally didn't know anything about the product. I had dealt with a million lost sales cycles at Pave over the last year and a half, and that manager didn't know any of that stuff. And they were teaching the new reps that they were hiring new process that frankly they didn't know how to sell this thing right, and that caused us a lot of pain. So if you're going to bring on a manager, start them with a group of experienced reps who actually can teach the manager the tribal knowledge while they work that up, and then they can start to hire themselves.
Okay, and then let's add one more to the layer, guys. Director to manager to AE ratio.
Yeah, I like 3 managers to 1 director ratio. I think that's usually if you have your 6 to 1 or 7 to 1, you're talking about 20 reps that roll up to 3 managers and a director. I feel like that's a strong structure that isn't overly inefficient. Your first, second line hire is a very, very critical and interesting hire. It sets a tone for all the rest of your second line hires after that. You want to make sure that you have clearly defined why you're hiring second line. You don't hire second line once you get to 20 reps and now you have 3 managers, and you hire second line when, as the leader of the sales org, you are about to transition into a different type of job, which is an executive job. Once you're a third level, you are becoming an executive. You are no longer a sales leader. If you're ready to move into an executive job, the company's ready for you to do that. That's when you're ready to hire second line. Before that, I would say like you just need to manage your managers and not hire that second line.
I think that first director hire can be a pretty dangerous hire because it now creates 3 degrees of separation between the VP, the director, the manager, and the reps. That's a lot. That's a lot of distance. And I'm not saying that the VP of sales should continue to manage 10 managers forever, but we brought in directors at Carta when it was like there needs to be a clear, cohesive SMB strategy across these 3 SMB managers. There needs to be a clear mid-market strategy across these 2 mid-market managers, not just someone needs a promotion. You can give someone a director title and still have them manage reps if you really need to do that. There are pros and cons of doing that, but I would just be really careful around when you decide to introduce another line. Again, to the similar points that we made earlier.
Alrighty, guys, we're running out of time. The clock is ticking. We've got to move to our recap. So, Armand, you've got the luxury of getting to do that today.
We talked about 3 major themes. Number 1, up front, that first hire needs to be a builder versus the 10th hire might be someone who's following process. From there, we talked about a couple of key roles. We talked about the moments where a CEO should keep control of the sales process as long as they have no idea what the product should be and no idea what the process should be. But then you hire your first AE role, you bring on a 1-to-1 ratio with SDR, you hire RevOps as early as possible, stretch your enablement person, and then SE, it sort of depends. And then we talked about some key ratios as you scale up. So we keep AE to SDR 1-to-1 and then eventually roll to 2-to-1. SE, RevOps, enablement. Again, that's sort of based on the need. Manager, you're usually looking at like 8, max 10, 12. You're really stretching that person. They're not going to be super effective. And then directors, you want to delay that to later. Mark was saying around 3 managers. I've seen it as late as 7, but really think about what your job is changing to as a VP of sales before you bring in directors.
Well, normally this is where you ask me how people can help us out. But to that point about how your job changes, folks, if you liked what we covered today, Mark, we had a special episode where Armand interviewed you about the type of leader that you need to be at different ARR milestones. And this is all coming from your journey of taking outreach from 0 to 100 million. And there were evolutions as the team grew, as you added RevOps people, as the product changes, as new competitors came into the market. And so you talk about, yeah, who you are at 10 million of revenue is very different than who you are at 75 million of revenue. And you take us through the way that that role changes and how your responsibility changed. So folks, if you liked this one, we've got a link somewhere to go check that one out. Guys, thanks. Awesome episode. I learned a lot. Thanks for listening, folks, and we'll see you next week on 30 Minutes to President's Club.